You're listening to Trek FM.
Hello and welcome to From There to Here, Trek FM's 50th Anniversary Rewatch of Star Trek, in which we look at all 729 episodes from beginning to end. I'm Mike from Stage 9.
And I'm Richard from No Show.
But from the network on the whole, you would not hear any of these shows if it weren't for Richard, so thank you,
Richard. You're welcome.
All right, today we're going to be talking about two episodes of Deep Space Nine, The Visitor and Hippocratic Oath. So let's get started with The Visitor. Okay, this is the episode where it starts off with Tony Todd as old Jake Sisko, and he's visited by someone who we will come to know as the Visitor in the opening title, a woman who's like, Jake Sisko, you're my favorite author. Why'd you stop writing? And he's like, well, it's a long story, but let me tell you. And he tells this whole story, basically his whole life story, where we find out that Ben Sisko disappeared in a freak accident, and basically Jake has spent his entire life trying to get Ben back to reality. And now it's all gonna come to a head tonight or something like that. So, this is considered by many to be one of, if not the best episodes of Deep Space Nine. Do you agree with that sentiment, Richard?
I do agree. Yeah, this episode definitely pulls at the heartstrings, for sure. I mean, I could only imagine what it would feel like. Well, I have my own father, but grew up with him and everything. But I can only imagine what it would be like to lose your father at 16. Is that when he lost him?
Somewhere in that area,
yeah. I could only imagine, and then have like him reappear and disappear, and it's like I can only imagine what kind of a mental job that would do to you.
Yeah, because it's not like you can just let go and be like, well, he's gone, because it's like, he's not gone, I need to try to get him back, I mean, that could really definitely mess you up, and I can totally understand why Jake would devote his entire life to try to get his dad back, but it is interesting. I mean, in a lot of ways, I kind of like see this as like Deep Space Nine's Inner Light, where it's like a small character piece which is sort of like outside of the normal reality, and people are like, this is one of the best episodes of the show, And it's weird because my reaction to this one is always like, yeah, it's good, but like it's not really real Deep Space Nine, is it? And then every time I watch it, I'm like, oh man, yeah, this episode really is really great, isn't it? And I'm like totally down with it, and it is, very much sort of like a Deep Space Nine episode. It basically takes you through like the history of the future. It feels like a small episode because you think it's just a guy telling, a woman a story. But it's pretty epic in its scale. You get to see the whole history of what happens like in the next 50 years, like with the Dominion War, and they're giving Nog like command of the Defiant, and there's like old people makeup all over the place, and yeah, it's a pretty awesome episode, all things
And don't we
considered.
see the uniforms that are used in what's the season finale for TNG, or what's the series finale? All good things.
Yeah. Yeah, they totally use those, which I love how there's like that go-to sort of continuity, like these are the uniforms of the future. But at the same time, like there's one part where they're like, well, a couple years later, here we are. And you just see them, and like everyone's just like in their normal uniforms. And now, the retcon in me is like, but wait a minute, didn't they change the uniforms in season 5 when first contact? So that bothers me. Obviously, they had no idea what was going on there, and they couldn't really, but it still bothers me. And yeah, I mean, I think that it's kind of interesting to see sort of like this alternate reality of like, because especially now, like at the time, it's like, oh, okay, that's an interesting story, and this is an interesting, future that they're presenting. But now that we've seen all of Deep Space Nine and we know how it ends, to see what, if you take this as canon, how things would have gone if Benjamin Sisko wasn't there. This was not the intent of the episode by any stretch of the imagination, but it's sort of an interesting thing to say, like, what difference does one man make? It's basically Jake Sisko's wonderful life,
Mm-hmm.
and or Ben Sisko's, depending on your perspective. And it is kind of interesting to see, like, oh, well, that, I mean, in some of it you think like, oh, well, Dax would still be alive, Jadzia would still be alive, she's not going to get offed by a random
Ducat, yeah.
yeah, and it's like, well, that, and you even think like, this woman who comes to see him, it's like he's telling her flat out, like, I have a chance to save my dad, I have a chance to make things right. And she's like, well, I can totally understand why you would do that, and I wish you the best. But what she's not thinking is like, if this happens, all of reality is completely changed. I may not even exist. He's going back. He's changing the past. He's, breaking the temporal prime directive. And, you think about the implications there. And it's almost like the reverse City on the Edge of Forever,
Mm-hmm.
where, Kirk had to give up Edith Keeler in order to preserve the timeline and prevent, Hitler from gaining power and all this stuff. And here, Sisko is basically, Jake is basically doing the opposite and saying, like, I don't care. I'm going to, get my dad back. And hey, maybe things will be better. I think in the end we see, yeah, things are probably on the whole better, with Ben in the picture than with him not in the picture. And, maybe even Jake was like, I can justify it because I think that my dad was a good person who would make the galaxy a better place. But at the same time, I think his other thinking there was much more selfish, and he's like, I don't care.
I want my dad back. Just
I
give
want
him
my
back
dad back. Yeah, it's gonna make my life better, even if it's gonna destroy this timeline. And that's what he does. And we don't really think about that in context because we're seeing it from the present day, as in like the year 2386 or whatever it is, the present day perspective. But if you look at it, if you think about it as, someone from Jake's perspective, old Jake, he really messed things up, like in a big bad way. But that's okay. Whatever.
That's not like we're gonna know anyways. I mean, the timeline changes, and it's gonna feel like regular stuff to us.
Mm-hmm. Also, this episode, I just want to bring this up. This episode, it's written by Michael Taylor, who, he was never like fully on staff at Deep Space Nine or anything like that. I think he was on the staff at Voyager, but he has written some of the best episodes of Deep Space Nine, and he really doesn't get the credit, but he wrote this and he wrote In the Pale Moonlight, which is the one where, Sisko is like, I'm going to start, I'm going to bring the Romulans into the war because you know what?
No, don't spoil it. Don't spoil it.
So, yeah, I mean, he wrote these two episodes, and yet, what he's more known for is like his work on Voyager, where he wrote a ton of episodes, over the span of years. But he's a really, really great writer who worked very closely with Ron Moore on the new Battlestar Galactica, and actually he co-created the show Virtuality. Did you ever see this? They only did one episode, but Ron Moore and Michael Taylor created Virtuality, which was basically Malfunctioning Holodeck the series. But anyway, it was actually a pretty good pilot, even though it didn't get picked up.
No, I don't think I saw that one.
It's a weird show. There's like a reality TV component in it. If you can find it, check it out. It's pretty good. But yeah, Michael Taylor, he was one of the co-creators on that. He's a very talented writer, and I just don't think he gets nearly enough credit, considering the fact that he wrote what are considered to be like two of maybe the top three episodes of Deep Space Nine, and he only wrote like three episodes of Deep Space Nine, and two of them are considered to be like the very best ever. Anyway,
Yeah.
moving on.
Okay.
The second episode for today is Hippocratic Oath, and this is the one where Julian and Miles are traveling in a runabout, and their ship is shot down onto this planet where there are some Jem'Hadar soldiers who are starting to question their place in society and decide that they've had enough of the Vorta and of their, chemical dependency on the Vorta, and they're going to kick the habit and revolt and live their own lives. And Bashir decides that he's going to help him do this, and O'Brien decides that he's going to get out of there as quickly as he can, and hijinks ensue. So what did you think about Hippocratic Oath?
If I was Chief O'Brien, I would have been gone. I would just drug Bashir out of there and just gone, just hightailed it. I mean, I guess if only there was a cure for something like this, like a addiction or something like that. That would be fantastic. But I'm sure a lot of people would love to hear something like that happening. But I mean, I'm with O'Brien on that one. It's like screw the whole. I mean, obviously the episode is about him, is about Bashir trying to help them out. But I mean, I wouldn't even give him a chance if it was me. That's for sure.
Yeah. It's interesting. I think that, obviously, this episode is doing what Star Trek does best, which is presenting a moral dilemma. And instead of giving you a clear-cut answer, it's basically making you ask the question, like, what would you do, And I think that it really does get you to think about, like, because I mean, it's not like anyone's right or wrong, and by having, like your two main characters in conflict with this, which is something which you could never do on any other Star Trek show because all the humans have to get along. And here they're just like, screw that, let's put these two people, at odds with each other. And I think that it really presents like an interesting dilemma. And like, I totally understand O'Brien's point of view because O'Brien's point of view is probably the much more realistic one, But at the same time, like I definitely sympathize with Bashir. And, this episode, I mean, one of the things that it does so well is it really gets you to feel bad for the Jem'Hadar, which up until this point, you're just like, these are the most dangerous aliens we've ever seen. They're, aside from maybe like the Borg, but they're worse than the Cardassians. They're worse than the Klingons. Like, these people will kill you and not even think about it because that's what they were bred to do. And then to see, this little group be like, we're sick and tired of it. And, like Bashir, like brings this up in the episode where he's like, look, they're trying to change. They're figuring it out. They're figuring out that they don't need to do this, and they're doing their best to essentially become better people, to stop being killing machines. And I feel obligated to help them out, even if they will kill us if we don't help them, And O'Brien's point of just like this, there's no way that this can end well for anyone. Is like, I sympathize, but there's no way that this can end well for anyone. I think that's really interesting, to present that dilemma and sort of, let the viewer just decide, because it's one of those things where after it's unlike Twisted, which we talked about yesterday, where it's like, what's going on? I don't know. Maybe we should just not do anything and the problem will solve itself. Oh yeah, it did. And you're like, okay, well, that was fun. With this one, it's like the problem is like, what's the solution? It's like, there is no solution, at least not a good one, and then they give you a solution. And the whole time you're just sitting there thinking like, well, what would have happened if, they kept on trying or whatever. it probably wouldn't have turned out well, but this didn't turn out well either. And you just keep on thinking about like those Jem'Hadar down on the planet, and you're like, damn, they were like really trying to do the right thing. And, life circumstances being what they are, they're dead. They're screwed, they're dead, and there's nothing you can do about it, And like there's even like that moment, right, where like the lead Jem'Hadar who's not addicted, and I could be getting this wrong a little bit, but basically they're like, well, you don't have to die. Your men are screwed, but there's no reason for you to stay on this planet. You can come with us, and still live your life. And he's like, no, I can't. And Bashir's like, why not? And he turns to O'Brien and he's like, you're a soldier, right? O'Brien's like, yeah, I'm a soldier. And he's like, okay, you explain it to him. And he just walks away, And it's like, that's, really interesting. And like O'Brien, then like breaks it down for Bashir, but just even the way that it's played, where he's not even like, he's just like, O'Brien, you're a soldier? And he's like, yep. And he's like, all right, you tell him I'm out. And he just leaves, Yeah. I think that's such, it's a really good episode. It's one that you don't really think about too often because it gets lost in the shuffle of all the amazing episodes of Deep Space Nine. But Deep Space Nine's bench is deep, and there are so many like hidden gems in there where you just come across them in a rewatch and you're like, oh my God. Like this is some amazing writing going on right here, and like I've been thinking about this episode ever since I saw it, and I'm gonna be thinking about it for days because it really gives you something to think about. So yeah, Hippocratic Oath.
I like it. I love the baseball reference. They got so much in the bench. I love it.
It's Deep Space Nine. It's all about the baseball references, right?
That's right.
So. All right. Well, I guess that's pretty much it for today. Richard, where can people find you on the internet?
They can find me on Twitter at xransom and also on the Babel Conference.
All right, and you can find me right here on Trek FM doing Stage 9 with John Mills, and you can also find me on Twitter at Mumbles3K. All right, well, that's it for today. Tomorrow, we will be back for 2 more episodes of Star Trek, Indiscretion and Persistence of Vision.